Hello, Master Quilters. You have made a whole year's worth of blocks, one each month, and I would say you're a master quilter now. So congratulations that you have made it. I only made 12 blocks. I just wanted to have kind of a throw, and I'm not making my sashing and cornerstones like what's in the illustration that I've given you. But in the description box where you'll find the instructions for setting, I've written out all the instructions and measurements for you to set your quilt together. If you wanted to make the quilt that is set on point in the illustration, I've given you all the measurements and how to piece the sashing. It's a 3-strip sashing and a 9-patch cornerstone, and they're very easy to do. And of course, stopping borders and outer borders are up to you. You can decide how wide you want them, and that's going to ultimately determine how big your quilt is when you're done. But you'll need to make one more block. We just made one block each month last year, January through December. So we just have 12 blocks we made together. So all you need is one more block that's going to finish at 12 inches. So you can remake one of the blocks we've already done in some different fabrics. Pick your favorite one maybe and make it over again. Or you can make a different 12-inch block. Or if you wanted to, this would be fun. You could take one whole block, a 12.5-inch square, and use your embroidery module and make your quilt label on it, you know, and put it on the front of your quilt instead of the back. That would be great. It'd be right there on the front. But anyway, I'm going to make the 12 block throw size. I'm not sure what size my quilt's going to end up, because I'm kind of just doing this as I go along. But I have all my blocks here, and I've kind of auditioned a few fabrics. I just kind of looked through what I have that seemed to be enough. And what I discovered was I like the blues with this quilt quite a bit, but I discovered this one was too dull, this one's too bright. So they're out. Then I had this kind of grayish fabric with feathers on it, which doesn't go with anything here. And then I had a piece of sort of a paisley, which I did consider this quite a bit. I put all the blocks out on my kitchen table, and I laid them so that you know, there would be enough blocks that I could see how it was going to look with a narrow sashing. I'm only going to make my sashing, I think it'll finish maybe at 2 inches, something like that. And this ended up being too light. I didn't think there was enough contrast, so I just went crazy, and I'm going to use a navy blue. So there'll be a navy blue sashing, and I'm not going to use cornerstones. It's just going to be a regular sashing. So what I'm going to do now is what we've done all year. I'm going to go ahead and press this fabric and use my best press and get it really, really starched, really good. And then I'm going to cut it and cut my 12.5-inch lengths, as many as I'm going to need. And I did put in the directions the layout that I'm finishing with. So if you want to finish your quilt like I'm doing mine, there's directions for that too. And so I'm going to press this, cut it, and get my quilt set together. I've got my fabric all pressed, and I've got the sun shining in the window here, so I hope you can see this. It's kind of a crazy afternoon with the sunshine here, but it is beautiful anyway. So anyhow, I've got my sashing fabric all pressed, and since my quilt has been a scrappy one from the very beginning, this is actually a scrap from another quilt that I did a really long border on both sides of it that I didn't want to have a seam in the middle. So I've got a very long piece here, and this is the straight of grain on it. My straight of grain's going this way on this piece. I wish it were going this way, but it isn't. So we'll have to deal with it. So I am going to straighten up the top and bottom edges, and then I'm going to start cutting my strips this way because these are going to go between my blocks, these strips, and I want them to go on the straight of grain going up and down the quilt. And I'm going to need, let's see, 4, 8, 16. I'm going to need 24 12.5-inch strips because I'm going to put these between my blocks, and then there will be some really long strips that will go between the rows of blocks. So I gotta look and see where I'm at here. This is just a nice, pretty neat way to use up my scraps. I wondered what I was going to be doing with this fabric when I made my other quilt, and I had this much left over. I think I'll take this off just a teeny tiny bit more. Teeny tiny. Is that a term? That's a quilting term, right? All right. Okay, so I have straight edges, top and bottom. Now let's straighten up. This is a fold, so I'm going to straighten up an edge here. And then I'm just going to start cutting. And I laid out my blocks. They're laid out right now on my kitchen table, which is huge. It's kind of like a farmhouse table. And I saw that a good many of the pieces that were in the patchwork are cut 2.5 inches. You remember that now that I said it, don't you? So anyway, I'm going to make my sashing 2.5 inches, and that's the size of a jelly roll. So if you wanted to get creative with your quilt in setting your blocks together, boy, it'd be fun to get a jelly roll. Or you could get a jelly roll that's tonal, and you wouldn't have to cut any if you did it this way. So I am just going to cut a bunch of these, and then I'm going to cut them to 12.5 inches because that's what my blocks are supposed to be. And remember how most of my blocks, I think I only had one that wasn't off, and the ones that are off, they're not off by much, like 1/8 of an inch or something like that. So if I cut my sashing strips at 12.5. That's what my block should measure. That's going to give me a visual on where I can, you know, if I need to repress something or change something somehow, then I don't have to have a tape measure handy all the time. I can use the sashing strips to kind of line things up. Let's see, what can I get here? I think I can only get, yeah, 24. I'm only going to be able to get one sashing strip out of these, but I have a jar, a great big glass jar that I'm off here somewhere. There we go. That I keep 2.5-inch strips in. So whatever I have left over will match right up with what's already in my jar for the next scrappy quilt. Okay, so I'm going to finish cutting these and get all my 2.5-inch sashing pieces cut. So these will be 2.5 by 12.5, and then I'm going to piece my quilt together, just the rows. These will go between the blocks, left to right, and we'll make my rows, and then I can measure and see how long my really long pieces have to be to go between the rows. So these sashing strips go between the blocks, and the really long sashing strips that I'm going to cut in a little bit go between the rows. Boy, that worked out great. Look at that. Woo! It's almost like I planned it that way, but I didn't. All right, there we go. Okay, let's see where we're at here, and I'll get these cut up, and then we'll be back and we'll go sew them on. So I'm getting my sashing strips sewn on to the sides of my blocks, and a couple of things to think about when you're putting your sashing on, is to I usually pin each end, and since several actually of my blocks were not quite 12.5 inches square when I finished my patchwork, which I've blamed mostly on pressing. I started each end and then I pin the middle, and I kind of see, I look, and if it looks like it needs to be a little more stable before it goes under the needle, I put a pin there. Sometimes it doesn't need it, but you know, I don't want to rip it out, so I'm gonna make sure it's okay. And see, I'm exactly at the corner, exactly at the corner. It looks pretty good. And when I am putting sashing on blocks that are patchwork, I stitch from the side of the block so that I can see where the points are on my quilt so that I don't chop off any points. So let me see if I can get this down here. Everybody should make a sewing video at least once so that you can get an idea of what it's like to figure out where to put your feet and your hands and your camera and how to sew around a camera. And it's just a bunch of fun. I need my, hold on, I need my stiletto. And a stiletto's always a great thing to have too. And just because we are toward the end of our quilt, it isn't an excuse to hurry. Remember what I've told you about just not doing anything in a hurry. It never has a very good outcome. And you know, spending time with your quilt, these are the last times you'll be able to sew on this quilt top. So there are moments that are fun to sort of hang on to if you can. There's no hurry. There's no reason to hurry through anything in life. It's never going to work out if you try to. Oh, you have to believe me on that. All right. Trim my threads. And, you know, if you wanted to, you could chain piece your blocks too. Your sashing onto your blocks. And then I'm going to finger press just a little bit. And then I will press these again, each of my blocks. Now I'll add another block. Wait, this is on the end. I'll add another block here. When you pick your blocks up off your table or your bed or wherever you have them laid out, and you carry them over to your machine, make sure you kind of have you can take a picture with your cell phone so you don't get lost in the middle of it like I just about did. And so there'll be another block here and then another block on the other side of that. So that is how I am going to put all my sashing strips on the sides of my blocks. And when we put the rows of the blocks together, it'll be one long strip from the edge to the edge. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish. You know how to do this. I'm going to finish putting all my sashing block bars on the sides of my quilt blocks and set my rows together, and then I'll come back and we'll cut the long strips that go between the rows and sew those on. Okay, I've got one row together. Let's see if you won't be able to see the whole thing, but here it is. 1, 2, 3 blocks, and then I have the sashing between each block. So now I've got enough put together that I can measure and see how long I need to cut these crosswise pieces of sashing. So I already know I'm going to cut them at 2.5 inches wide. I just need to know how long. So there is 24. Let's see. I'm going to put a pin. Here's 24 inches. And plus plus 19 3/4. Okay, math. You math whizzes, what is it? 24 plus 1.75 equals 43 3/4 inches. So I'm going to cut, let's see, I'm going to cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strips at 43 3/4 inches. And then I'm going to go ahead and set my quilt together, and I'll lay it out over the sofa and look at it for a couple of days, and I will make a decision about if I want to add another border or if I want to just quilt it that size and put a pretty binding to enhance the whole quilt. Yeah, so you do the same. Go ahead and set your quilt together now, and if you have any questions, I know I have forgotten something. So just send me a message on Facebook or comment in the Facebook group. I help admin on the Bernina 7 and 8 series Facebook group and the Bernina Beginners 7 and 8 series embroidery group. So go join those groups if you aren't already. If you're seeing this on YouTube, go join those groups and just ask. Or you can even leave a comment and I'll help you all that I can. So in about 2 weeks or so, I'll be back and we will quilt this on our Bernina machines with the embroidery module. So in the meantime, enjoy your days and have fun with your quilt, and I'll see you in the next video.